What happens when the woman who gave everything, her money, her time, her whole heart's, told she's not even welcome at her own daughter's wedding? Would you still stay silent? Would you still pay for the party? Diane McAllister raised 2 kids on her own, sacrificed her dreams, and funded a future that never seemed to remember her. But one email changed everything. This isn't just a story about family. It's a story about being seen, about drawing the linen knot in anger, but in love for yourself. And when Diane finally said nothing, the world heard her loud and clear. Diane McAllister had just poured her morning coffee when her iPad chimed with a new message. It was a quiet Thursday in Savannah, Georgia-y kind of morning that whispered peace. The azaleas outside were blooming, the kitchen smelled like hazelnut roast, and she had no reason to expect anything unusual until she saw the sender, Rachel McAllister, her daughter, her only daughter. There was no subject line, just Rachel's name in the inbox, floating like a ghost. Diane smiled as she tapped it open, thinking it might be a sweet update about the wedding, maybe a dress fitting, or a request for cake flavors. They'd last spoken 3 weeks ago, and Diane had already wired $40,000 toward the celebration. She'd even emailed the florist Rachel had adored since college, confirming they'd cover the full bill. But the smile didn't last. The email was brief, dry, almost corporate. "Hi, Mom. After discussing with Andrew and his parents, we've finalized the guest list for the vineyard ceremony. Due to space limitations and family preferences, we've decided to keep it intimate. I know this might be disappointing, but we've arranged for you to watch it all via a private live stream link. It'll be just like being there. Just like being there." Diane sat in silence, the screen glowing in her lap. Her coffee cooled. Her pulse didn't spike. Her hands didn't shake, but something inside her tilted, as if the ground had quietly shifted beneath her without permission. She read the message again, then a third time. Searching, maybe, for some hidden clause? Just kidding. A second paragraph. A dear Mom to soften the blow. But no. Just Mom, like a label on a grocery list. No apology. No offer to explain how a mother who had raised 2 kids on a widow's salary could be replaced by a webcam and a Wi-Fi signal. She didn't cry. Instead, Diane did something she hadn't done in years. She paused. She let the stillness sink in. And then, with the kind of calm that frightens people more than fury ever could, she typed 4 words in reply. "Sure. Enjoy your day. No exclamation point. No guilt. Just withdrawal." Neat and final, she closed the iPad, placed her coffee in the sink, and went about her morning routine. Makeup, keys, purse. A glance in the hallway mirror to check for lipstick on her teeth. But it wasn't just another Thursday. That was the day Diane stopped pretending her sacrifices were seen. That was the day she realized something most mothers hope never to admit. Sometimes love gets mistaken for availability, and sometimes availability gets mistaken for obligation. As she backed out of the driveway, azaleas in bloom, she didn't feel angry. Not yet, just erased. Driving through downtown Savannah, Diane let the morning traffic blur past her windows. The dogwoods were in bloom. Spanish moss swayed gently from the oak trees. Her city hadn't changed, but something in her had. It was strange how one email, just a few lines, could do what no storm or diagnosis had managed. It hollowed her out quietly, like termites in a floorboard. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was something deeper, something heavier. As she pulled into the university parking lot, she sat for a moment with the engine off, hands on the steering wheel. A quiet breath escaped her lips. She'd worked at Armstrong College for 33 years, the last 18 as senior financial coordinator. Everyone knew Diane McAllister. Always the first in, the last to leave. Always the one with extra granola bars in her drawer for hungry students and tissues for staff breakdowns. But no one knew she once pawned her wedding ring so Rachel could stay in her NYU law program. or that she deferred her knee replacement for 2 years to co-sign Carter's first mortgage when he and his wife were expecting. No one saw the nights she graded accounting papers while simultaneously budgeting how to keep the electricity on, or how often she told herself, "It'll be worth it when they're safe, when they don't have to struggle like I did." That was the unspoken oath of single motherhood. Diane had made peace with sacrifice early. Widowed at 35, she'd buried Jonathan quietly in the spring, then returned to work 2 days later. There were mouths to feed, bills to cover. She couldn't afford to grieve publicly. Rachel was 7, Carter was 4. She became both parents overnight. She still remembered Rachel's 10th birthday. Money was tight, but she somehow pulled off a scavenger hunt through Forsyth Park. Diane stayed up past midnight the night before, painting clues and sewing little satin pouches for each treasure. Rachel beamed the whole day. That was the year Rachel told her, "You're the best mom in the world." It echoed now like a ghost from a life that never truly belonged to her. She'd been the best mom when Rachel called sobbing after her first breakup at NYU. Diane had stayed on the phone for 2 hours, whispering reassurance while stirring soup on the stove. She was the best mom when she flew to Brooklyn after Rachel's panic attack during the bar exam prep. She was the best mom when she bought Rachel a new MacBook after hers crashed 3 days before a deposition deadline. But the best mom didn't get an invitation to the wedding. Apparently, the title expired with the wire transfer. That afternoon, Diane walked through the university halls as she always did. Polite nods. "Hey, Miss McAllister." Familiar routines. She smiled, answered emails, processed budgets. But she was somewhere else entirely. She thought about the $40,000 she'd already paid. Not just in checks, but in blood, time, energy, silence. The florist Rachel loved since undergrad. The caterer who'd flown in a sample tray. The engraved invites Diane never saw. The lace Rachel showed her on FaceTime one evening, "Not quite final yet, Mom, but close." Diane had smiled through that call. Just like always. Because that's what good mothers do. They don't interrupt. They don't ask to be considered. They just nod and transfer the funds. And now she was told to sit on her couch and watch it all play out on a screen. Like a distant relative. Or worsey stranger. That night, she reheated some leftover chicken soup. She didn't feel hungry, but she needed to keep a routine. She kept telling herself, "This is fine. You're fine. She's just overwhelmed. Planning a wedding is stressful." But deep down, Diane knew. This wasn't about a wedding. This wasn't about a venue being too full. This was a mirror. A moment that revealed how little she'd been seen all these years. How her presence had been absorbed into utility. How love, in the eyes of others, had become indistinguishable from service. She rinsed her bowl and turned on the television. But the noise didn't help. Because once you realize your sacrifices were transactional to someone you raised with unconditional love, there's no show that can drown that out. The first message came at 8:17 a.m. sharp the next morning. "Rachel? Mom, why haven't you replied? Did you get the email?" Then another at 8:22. "Rachel, please don't make this into a big deal. We can talk about it, but I need you to be supportive." By lunchtime, there were 5 missed calls and a voicemail that ended with an audible sigh and the words, "This isn't about you." Diane didn't respond. She placed her phone face down beside her salad and went back to checking invoices. She wasn't trying to be dramatic. She was just done. And being done wasn't loud. It was quiet. Final. Around 3 p.m., a knock came at her door. Carter. He stood in his pressed slacks and polo shirt like a man on a mission. His hair was wind-tousled, his brow furrowed. Diane didn't even have time to speak before he walked in. "Mom, what's going on?" he said, pacing the living room. "Rachel says you're refusing to participate in the wedding now? That you're upset about not being invited?" Diane folded her hands. "She didn't not invite me, Carter. She specifically asked me to stay home. and then sent me a live stream link like it was some kind of Netflix show. Carter waved a hand, flustered. It's not ideal, I get it. But come on, Andrew's family is really traditional. They're footing most of the bill, and they have expectations. I've already contributed $40,000, Diane said evenly. He blinked. Wait, really? She stood and walked to the hallway table, opened the drawer, and pulled out the printed receipts. She handed them to him without comment. And, she added, I was preparing to send another 60, but I haven't done it yet. Carter stared at the number. His jaw tightened. They were counting on that, he muttered. I was, too, Diane replied, voice steady. I was counting on being present at my own daughter's wedding. There was a pause, deep and weighty. Carter shifted uncomfortably. I think you're being kind of selfish, he said finally. I mean, this isn't the time to make it about you. Rachel's under a lot of pressure. Diane felt it like a slap, not because it was loud, but because it was expected. There it was again, the expectation that she be small, agreeable, available. Her voice was soft, but it hit like steel. Let me be clear. I'm not funding a celebration I'm not welcome at. Carter took a step back, then rubbed his temples. But you've already paid so much. Why throw it all away now? She met his gaze. Because it's not about the money. It's about the principle. He didn't seem to hear that. Or maybe he just didn't want to. Look, can't you just talk to Rachel? She's freaking out. She said Andrew's parents are going to pull out if the remaining balance isn't paid. Diane exhaled, long and slow. Then let them, she said. You're seriously going to let her wedding fall apart over a miscommunication? Diane raised an eyebrow. A miscommunication? Carter, she didn't forget to add me to the guest list. She told me to stay home. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And now you're choosing to be petty, he shot back, louder than before. No, she said, calm as ever. I'm choosing to stop being treated like a wallet with a pulse. He shook his head. You always make things about yourself. That was it. That was the moment something inside her crystallized. Diane stood up straight, her voice still low but laced with years of exhausted clarity. You need to leave. Carter's face changed. What? You heard me, she said. Get out of my house. Mom Carter, she interrupted. I have spent decades giving everything I had time, energy, money, love, and now I'm done. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. I won't continue to be the villain in a story I wrote with love. He stared at her. She didn't flinch. Finally, he grabbed his keys and walked toward the door. No dramatic exit, just the quiet click of the lock behind him. And with that, Diane was alone again. But this time, it didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like clarity. That night, the rain came gently, almost polite-a-lapping on the tin awning above Diane's porch swing. She sat curled under an old knit blanket, a half-empty glass of Merlot resting on the armrest beside her. Her porch light glowed softly, casting long shadows across the wet wooden floor. She hadn't turned on the television, didn't feel like reading. Music felt intrusive. What she wanted, strangely, was the sound of nothing. She thought about how silence had always been a companion in her life. After Jonathan passed, it moved in like a second tenant. At first, it was cruel. It made space echo. It reminded her with every click of a light switch that she was alone. But over time, it became something else, something almost sacred. The silence let her cry when the kids were asleep. Let her whisper prayers she never expected answers to. Let her be exhausted without an audience. And tonight, it welcomed her again, not as a widow, not as a mother, but just her. Her phone buzzed inside the house again and again. Probably more texts. Maybe Rachel's fiancé now, or Andrew's mother with a polite yet biting rebuke, or Carter trying to smooth things over. Diane didn't move. She took a slow sip of wine and let the warmth fill her chest. Not just the physical warmth, but the recognition that she had nothing left to give. Not because she was empty, but because she finally realized she was more than what she gave. She stared into the rain and remembered Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Rachel had promised to fly in from Boston, but canceled last minute. Work emergency. Diane had cooked the whole meal anyway: turkey, sweet potato casserole, cranberry chutney, homemade apple pie. Carter and his wife had dropped by for 30 minutes, plates in hand, already dressed for a second dinner elsewhere. Diane had eaten alone that night. She didn't even light candles. Just sat at the kitchen island, fork in one hand, a paperback novel in the other, pretending the food tasted like tradition. She remembered the time Rachel forgot her birthday, entirely called 2 days later with a half-hearted, "I've been so swamped, Mom." Diane had laughed it off, said, "Don't worry about it, I'm just glad you're doing okay." But tonight, she couldn't pretend anymore. She couldn't keep building a narrative where neglect was just stress, where exclusion was just logistics. She looked up at the string lights lining the porch railing, swaying in the breeze. For the first time in years, she said out loud quietly, to no one, "What about me? What about Diane? Not Mom, not the check writer, not the woman who always understands, just Diane." What made her laugh lately? What did she want from a weekend? From her mornings? From her life? She'd been everything to everyone for so long that the answer felt foreign. She used to love painting. Did anyone even know that? She hadn't picked up a brush in years. She used to keep a notebook by the bed, filled with little poems, grocery lists, and late-night thoughts. When did she stop writing them? The deeper she fell into that stillness, the more she realized she'd disappeared. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, gently. With every postponed plan, every quiet compromise, every "it's okay, I'll handle it." And now, sitting under the hush of Georgia rain, she saw it clearly. She wasn't heartbroken because she was left out of a wedding. She was heartbroken because it took being uninvited to realize she hadn't truly been seen in years. She drained the rest of the wine, stood up slowly, and walked inside. She didn't bother checking the phone. She turned off the lights, climbed into bed fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. No tears came, only the quiet ache of recognition, the kind that doesn't beg for pity, but whispers, "Something has to change." And in that whisper, something stirred, not rage, not grief. Just the first breath of returning to herself. The next morning, Diane woke up before the sun, not because she had to. There were no lunchboxes to pack, no alarm clocks set to school schedules, but the silence had changed overnight. It wasn't heavy anymore. It felt clean, open, like freshly tilled soil. She made coffee, black this time. No cream, no sugar, just clarity. Then, she opened her laptop and pulled up her financial accounts. For years, she'd kept detailed spreadsheets, tracked every bill, every tuition payment, every loan co-signed, every dollar funneled into what she called the future fund. But this morning, she created a new folder. She named it Only for Joy. Inside, she opened a blank document. The title read, Things I've Always Wanted to Try. She wrote pottery class, wildflower garden, solo trip to Maine, adopt a senior dog, learn to make fresh pasta, dance again just once. Then, she picked up her phone, not to check texts, not to return Rachel's calls, but to call Linda Halpern, her financial advisor. When Linda picked up, Diane got straight to the point. "I'd like to cancel the transfer scheduled for the Harper Rose venue in Massachusetts." A beat of silence. Then Linda replied with calm professionalism, "Of course. May I ask why?" Diane smiled gently. "Because the event no longer reflects my values." Another pause. Then, understood. "We'll redirect the funds." "Great," Diane said. "Also, I'd like to set up a new savings account. Something small. Automatic deposit. Monthly. It's for personal use only." Linda sounded pleased. Name of the account? Diane looked out the window. The sun was rising now, spilling gold across her backyard like a promise. Joy, she said. Just joy. That afternoon she took a walk downtown. Not to run errands or pick up groceries, but simply because she felt like it. She wandered past old storefronts she used to rush by. A bookstore she hadn't entered in years. A local pottery studio with a handwritten sign. Classes begin the 3rd of June, all skill levels. She stepped inside. The clay smelled damp and clean. The room buzzed with quiet energy. Not performance, not pressure, just people creating. Hi, she said to the woman behind the desk. Is it too late to register? Not at all, the woman smiled. We'd love to have you. Diane filled out the form and paid on the spot. On her way home, she passed Tom Ellis, a fellow faculty member she'd worked alongside for years, widower, kind eyes. Always brought extra napkins to staff meetings. They had shared lunch once, years ago. He'd invited her to dinner a few times after that, but she'd always declined. Too busy, too many obligations. But today? Tom? She called out. He turned, surprised. Diane, haven't seen you out here in a while. I was wondering, she said, a little breathless from the walk. That new Italian place near the square, have you tried it yet? He smiled. Not yet. Heard good things, though. Maybe we could go sometime, she said, her voice clear. Tom blinked, then lit up. I'd like that. She walked the rest of the way home with a slight ache in her knees. And something else, too. Not excitement, not relief. Something sturdier. Self-trust. For years, Diane had said yes to everything that was asked of her. Yes to late-night calls. Yes to emotional labor. Yes to wiring thousands. Yes to guilt as currency. But now she was learning to say yes for other reasons. Yes to gardens. Yes to pottery. Yes to pasta and wine with a kind man who remembered her coffee order. Yes to boundaries, not as walls but as invitations to clarity. And most of all, yes to herself. By Tuesday, the texts turned desperate. Rachel, Mom, please answer. The venue says the balance is past due. We're going to lose the date. Rachel, this isn't fair. I was going to talk to you about coming after things settled down. Rachel, they're saying if we don't pay by Friday, we lose everything. Mom, please. Each message blinked on Diane's lock screen, like a dying lighthouse, too late to guide anyone home. She didn't answer. Instead, she watered her geraniums, paid her property tax, reserved a seat for a nature retreat in Asheville. She didn't ignore Rachel out of spite, she simply refused to be baited back into usefulness. On Wednesday morning, her email pinged. The subject line read, "Please reconsider." Diane read it over breakfast. Mom, I know you're upset about the live stream thing, but this is extreme. The Harper Rose venue canceled the booking this morning. Without the final balance, we're out. Andrew's parents are furious. They're saying this proves you can't be reasoned with. If you care about me at all, we need that money today. We can revisit you attending if that's what you want. But we need the funds first. Rachel. Diane sipped her coffee, unfazed. So now her presence was negotiable. Like an upgrade. Like a courtesy that depended on a wire transfer. She could be seen if she paid for the privilege. She didn't reply. She didn't rage. She didn't correct Rachel's wording or highlight the manipulation. Instead, she pressed archive and typed just 5 words in a blank message to Carter, who had also begun texting. My RSVP went to silent. Later that day, she passed Tom in the hallway. He asked if she still wanted to try that new restaurant. She smiled. Let's go Friday. By Friday, word had spread through the family. The wedding was off. At least the big one. Andrew's parents had withdrawn all funding. The venue was lost. The caterer dropped them. The florist refused last-minute scrambling. Guests had already booked flights, some non-refundable. Carter texted again. Rachel is spiraling. She says everything is ruined. They're talking about doing it in Andrew's uncle's backyard now. Diane didn't respond. She sat in her pottery class, shaping imperfect bowls with imperfect hands. She didn't care that they wobbled. They were hers. On Saturday, she received a handwritten card in the mail. Rachel's cursive still looked the same careful, a little dramatic, the kind of script that once wrote "I love you, Mommy" on fridge drawings. The letter wasn't quite an apology, more of a half confession, half defense. Words like pressure, caught in the middle, and you took it the wrong way floated through the paragraphs. No line ever simply said, "I'm sorry for excluding you," and nowhere in the entire letter did Rachel ask if Diane was okay. Diane placed the card in the drawer where she kept old receipts and expired warranties. She didn't tear it up. She didn't burn it. She just filed it under unresolved. That evening, as the sky turned pink over Savannah, Diane took her glass of wine out to the porch again. The same swing, the same view, but she wasn't the same woman. She had no desire to gloat, no need for revenge. She simply no longer owed explanations. Not to Rachel, not to Carter, not to anyone who measured her worth by what she could provide. And the most satisfying part? She hadn't shouted, she hadn't begged, she hadn't even raised her voice. Her boundary spoke louder than her sacrifice ever did. She was no longer auditioning for the role of best mom. She was just Diane. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The wedding happened. Sort of. According to Carter, Rachel and Andrew got married in Andrew's uncle's backyard. It rained. The chairs were mismatched. The flowers never arrived. Andrew's mom cried, not happy tears. A cousin streamed the ceremony on Instagram for those who couldn't come. Diane didn't watch. She spent that weekend hiking a forest trail just outside Asheville, breathing in pine needles and birdsong. Her phone was on silent in her backpack. When she reached the overlook, she sat down on a mossy stone, pulled out a peanut butter sandwich, and exhaled. Not a breath of regret, a breath of release. In the weeks that followed, Rachel sent one more email. It was longer, more emotional. She said things like, "I didn't mean to hurt you. You should have told me how you felt. I was under so much pressure. You've always been so strong." Diane read it once, then archived it. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't waiting for understanding. That was the miracle of boundaries. They didn't require permission. At her next yoga class, she told the story. Not the whole thing, just enough. A woman beside her, soft-spoken gray hair in a braid, gently placed a hand on Diane's shoulder and said, "It's not too late to raise yourself, too." Diane smiled. That sentence stayed with her. She started journaling again. Not about pain, but about rediscovery. She planted wildflowers. Learned to make pasta from scratch. Let Tom take her dancing one evening, under string lights and an old Marvin Gaye record. Rachel didn't call again. And for the first time, Diane didn't wait by the phone. Because here's what she learned. You can spend your whole life trying to be needed. You can bend yourself backward until you forget your own shape. You can give love until you're hollow and still not be invited to the table. But that doesn't mean you're empty. It just means it's time to stop pouring into people who only open the door when they're thirsty. Diane didn't become bitter. She became better. Not louder, not colder, just clearer. And every morning now, before she checks emails or reads the news, she pours her coffee into her favorite chipped mug, sits on her porch swing, and whispers, "Good morning, Diane." Not mom, not fixer, not funder, just Diane. And that's finally enough.